Hi there, I'm George Hamilton, and you're listening to In Conversation With.
Football.
I did an interview once with you remember the year Clare won the All Ireland, the hurling.
Oh yeah, 2013.
No, this was the Marty Morrissey famous.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Kyle Milk and Clare tonight, and I was sent down to interview them as they left for their holiday afterwards, and we turned up at Shannon Airport. Gerard Nan was the manager. It was this pre 9/11, so we were able to get on the plane and everything before they were going. We were actually thrown off the plane by the captain because he was going to miss his slot. It was really good. But in the course of the interview with Gerard Nan, I said, "But why are you taking them to Thailand?" I think it was Thailand they went to. And he said, "Well, you know, we've had such a hard year, and we've had to battle so hard to get to this All Ireland, and we thought to ourselves, well, there's a choice of only two places if we want to get away from where they talk about hurling or know anything about hurling, and that's either Tipperary or Thailand."
Do you like how George is dressed?
Yeah,
very dapper, isn't it?
I feel underdressed.
You have to.
He sets a standard, is what he thinks.
I used to be a student.
Yeah.
And I dressed like you.
Is this your uniform, George?
This is my uniform, yes.
Yeah. We'll touch on that.
You can do that. Because you never know. It could be what we say in vision, you see. And if I'm in vision, I have to look the part. So, anyway, what do you all do?
Communication studies.
All of you?
Yes.
So that's why.
That's kind of how we met, and also through the society that we have here at NPS.
And this is a podcast?
Yes, it is. Yes. So we started as a radio show, but we're now a podcast. Just because it's a lot more mobile, a lot more flexible, so we can do interviews as and when they come to us, rather than guests trying to fit our schedule into theirs. Which is a lot more complicated for people like yourself in the media who are obviously quite busy on a day-to-day basis. It's hard to nail down one time.
I know.
In a week.
And then you lose your messages and can't remember when you.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I think I accidentally. I
raised them up.
I have a thing where I don't like messages getting clogged up, so I tend to just kind of sweep through them.
Yeah.
But I just needed reminding about when.
That's all right.
It was nothing against you personally.
No, I didn't take any offence. I just thought it was very funny.
You just reminded me. No, it's
you remind me of a lot of people.
To be fair, Colin is our chief email officer. You know, that's what we call him. So he actually books most of our guests. So in fairness to him, we do like to give him a little bit of shit. But
you did email me in the first place, didn't
you? I did, and that's actually a great story. So we'll get into the show. So this is in.
We haven't begun yet. No.
Oh well.
No.
It's a good thing you wore a seat.
Sorry, you said that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So this is In Conversation With. I'm Colin, and I'm always joined by my co-host Greg.
At least you looked at me this time.
And Gavin.
How you doing?
And as we were just teasing there, I obviously emailed George, as I do all of our guests. And we were over in the Henry Granton studio, and I sent away the email, and I think probably about half an hour later I get a phone call from a number I don't recognise, and I pick up the phone.
Oh, this was in our little office.
It was, and I pick up the phone, and it's, "Hi Colin, yes, George Hamilton here." "Oh, hi George." And George was calling me from Rome, where he was just about to commentate on the Roma-Liverpool game in the Champions League semi-final. And I was completely taken aback. I think you could probably tell it in my voice, George. I was very surprised that you would actually... Because I do leave my number at the end of the email, but that's...
People generally tend to try and disregard it as best they can.
Well,
they just email back usually, but you took the time to...
My excuse was that because I checked my mails and it was a busy time, obviously, I figured if I let it go, I'd forget all about it because the mailbox would get clogged.
Yes, exactly.
I'd never look back that far, and then you'd say, "That fella never got back." So I thought that
probably would have gotten back to you anyways.
Persistent, if nothing else.
But so I'll ask the first question as I generally do. What was your initial thought when I did email you asking you to be on the show?
I was very delighted to be asked, and I'll tell you why. Because at the very start of my career, I was the recipient of an enormous amount of help from all sorts of people, from the very top levels to the people I was working with when I was starting off. And I just feel that it is important for the continuum of what we do and the maintenance of standards, because obviously I am a little bit older than you guys and will be stopping doing this before you do, that I think it's best that standards are maintained. And the best way to do that is impart the information and the knowledge that you have and share it and get it out there. And I'll tell you a story about that, which you may or may not have heard because I tell it often, but it was to do with my beginning as a broadcaster. First of all, there was the audition that I did in the BBC in Belfast when I presented a minute-and-a-half report on a rugby match. And I was sitting there pretty tense and nervous, reading it on my own in the studio with this production lady on the other side of the glass and a sound engineer, so it was kind of nerve-wracking. And I read through the report, which I was doing like on Thursday afternoon, having been at the match on Saturdays, so I had all these days to get it just right. And I said it was Queen's University against Ballymena, and Queen's University were on top. However, Ballymena turned over, except we didn't use the phrase back then, and scored a try. And when it was all over, Joy Williams, who went on to become the first female head of sport in the BBC anywhere, she was the one who was taking the audition, and she brought me outside into the cubicle and said, sit down there and read that to me again, not through the microphone, just read it. And when we got to the paragraph that began, however, she said, stop! She said, if you were telling me that as opposed to reading a script about it, what would you say? So Queen's University were on top, but Ballymena turned it up. Yeah, so why are you saying however when you would actually say but? Because the middle B in BBC is broadcasting, not BWC, British Writing Corporation, but BBC. So think about that. That was the first big tip I got. Then, when I'd eventually got in and got on a bit, I found myself in Dublin about to do my first rugby commentary. And it was a radio commentary on Ireland-Scotland in 1974, I think. And in those days, BBC and RTÉ, public service broadcasters, had loads of money. Excuse me. So we came down on a Thursday to stay at a Shuttle Hotel, which, as you can imagine, would have been quite a nice thing to do. Yeah. Anyway, Friday morning, captain's run, as they call it now, Scotland were in College Park, Trinity College. So out down Kildare Street and in, she took me, and this is all new to me. And I arrived in College Park, and there's the Scottish rugby team running up and down the pitch, passing the ball, doing this, that, and the other. And a few people watching. And one of them was a man I instantly recognised off the television, the BBC's commentator Bill McLaren. Tall, elegant Scotsman, shock of black hair, beautiful cream gabardine coat, and 3 or 4 people in a little knot talking to him. But I recognised him because he was taller than the rest. He stood out. I knew his face from television. And I said, oh God, Joe, there's Bill McLaren. He said, Christ, darling, because Joy was a bit like that. I said, Christ, come on, I introduce you. He said, no, don't, jeez, you can't do that. I mean, he's Bill McLaren and I haven't done one yet. Anyway, she was the kind of lady who would, a former hockey player, nothing stood in her way. So she strode up the touchline to Bill, and of course Bill knew her. So when Bill saw her coming, he was the nice gentleman that he was. I said, hello, Joy. And Joy said, Christ, Bill, great to see you in Dublin. What do you introduce you, George? This is my new commentator. And I'm kind of, please don't, Bill McLaren had a way with him. He came from a town called Hoyk in Scotland on the Scottish borders. And there they have a boiled sweet called a Hoyk ball, like a brandy ball, or, the things you used to buy in shops. Anyway, he always had a little packet of these in his coat. And he picked out the things. He said, have a Hoyk ball. That was the first thing he said to me after we'd shaken hands. And then he excused himself from the men who were with him and Joy, who then started talking to them. And he walked me up the touchline. I think Bill McLaren is taking me up the touchline to talk to me. He said, it's your first one tomorrow. I said, yes. He said, well, I'll give you a few wee tips. And he pulled out of his pocket the commentary sheet that he had. And here's another good tip coming. And it was like 4, we used to call them foolscap pages, A4 pages, and they're all sellotaped together. And at the top of the front, top of the middle of the top, there were the 2 teams. And that's everything else kind of emanated from that. And these 4 pages were absolutely covered in colour-coded notes. I said, goodness gracious, Bill, that's like a work of art. How long did it take? He said, well, they announced the teams on Monday, as they did in the amateur days. They always announced the teams early on in the week. So he said, when the teams come out, I put them in. And then I just set to work, and every time something strikes me, I put it in. And I've got all this stuff here, so I have plenty of material by the time Saturday comes. And when I go in the comedy box, I lay this before me, and it's there for me to use. I said, my goodness me, how will you ever get all that into the commentary? He said, I won't. He said, I will only use 5% of what's written there, but until the game is over, I will not know which 95% to junk. And that was it. And if you ever get the chance,
and go to what is now known as the Bill McLaren Lounge in Murrayfield, which is the press lounge just behind the press box, you will see framed on the wall, complete with a picture of him, the copy of, maybe it's the original, of his very last commentary.
Oh, go ahead.
Framed on the wall. And the press lounge is actually called the Bill McLaren Lounge.
That's lovely.
Yeah. But that was, in answer to your question, why did I accept your invitation?
Yes.
So that's why.
Yeah. And I think it is a pretty universal answer in this industry. A lot of the people that we've talked to in RTÉ and other organisations, they say that we are the next generation, if you will. We're only starting to find our feet in this industry. But like you said, maybe in 20 or 30 years' time, we'll be where you are, and we have to keep the high standard, in fairness, that you've set.
Well, if you accept it, and you're you know, to get the best out of yourself, you're going to have to, in whatever field it is you're in, you're going to have to apply yourself. If you want to become the top surgeon or the top consultant in psychiatry or whatever it is, you're going to have to apply yourself to that. And it could take you, I mean, my stepdaughter had turned 31, and she has just done another exam, which is a GP exam. She's a medical student, I should have said. But she's now 31, still doing exams. So I think in any field, you've got to keep doing the exam, whether it's a real exam or whether it's a simple step up that you're trying to achieve by working harder at some specific aspect.
Setting a goal
and going for it. And I often say, when people will ask me, how I might go about my work, it's only now, well into my career, and the other end of it, that I'm looking back and saying, I don't think I ever stopped being a student. This is what it was. Like my subjects were German and French, but I realise that what I do now is exactly what it was like when I was doing my dissertation. Every football match, every rugby match, every athletics meeting is like a dissertation. Mm-hmm. You got to prepare it and make sure you're on top of it. And the old Roy Keane thing, which is not his alone, but fail to prepare to fail. It applies in every walk of life. And you guys I think are very lucky, because it's a very fulfilling career, communications. It is undoubtedly, in whatever sphere of it you end up in. I think you'll find that you are fulfilled doing what you do. And I've often said over the years, again, it's a pleasure and a privilege to work in the RTÉ Sports Department, which is where I work, but I can equate it to the BBC Sports Departments, where I came from, in Belfast and London, that people in sport, in particular, tend to be in the game because they want to be. They haven't just become a radio producer, a TV producer, and been assigned to that. Mm-hmm. They tend to be there because they want to be, because to some it's an unattractive area because, well, they may not have much interest in sport, but equally it's mostly weekend work, which doesn't appeal to everybody.
It's generally on the sideline, it's wet, it's windy.
Yes, there's all of that too. So it's just, I think, something that attracts people who want to be in it, and that in itself creates a wonderful buzz and a wonderful atmosphere.
Yeah. So we'll take you back to the start as a young boy growing up north in Belfast. Mm-hmm. I suppose sport was obviously a big interest of yours growing up. It had to be because it shaped your career. But what about broadcasting? Was that always something that you had envisioned?
Well, there's a funny thing. I'm an only child, and only children tend to talk to themselves. And
I can relate.
An only child.
I am an only child.
Well, I could rattle off a number of only children who do what I do, or did what I do, now retired or sadly deceased. Fred Cogley, Jim Sherwin, Jim Neely up north, Ger Canning, who grew up as an only child.
One of our former guests as well.
And
who had a lot of things to say about yourself as
well. With whom I go back a long way. UCC, Queen's University, Collingwood Cup, yes. And the last one I was going to mention was Marty Morrissey.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So I think you're kind of turned in on yourself for your own entertainment almost. And my entertainment, because my dad was a football player, he played for Cliftonville in the Irish League, who were a team the same as Bohemians. They were amateur in those days, and they never won anything. But he used to take me to the games on a Saturday and get me into the dressing room and all that when I was a little nipper, because there was never a big crowd at the game, so it was a handy place to take a kid, and there wouldn't be not that you'd be in any danger, but you wouldn't be in any.
You wouldn't get too far. Kind of.
No. So anyway, he would take me, and this sparked my interest. And Solitude, their ground, is a tight little ground, so we would stand behind a goal, and close enough that you could actually smell the imbrication of the goalkeeper. You know, it was wonderful. And this just sucked me in. And there were always goals being scored because they were always getting beaten. But that image of the goalkeeper's name was Jim Parkhill. But did you see? Watch Jim Parkhill doing his stuff, and then of course the ball would go past him and thud into that net, and it would be just like a foot away from your face. And go, wow! It just kind of got me absolutely enthralled. So when I was at home playing, we had a dining room table, not the size of this obviously, but there was a big heat-resistant mat that my mother preserved the wood with. And on that heat-resistant mat, I painted the lines of the football pitch. And they got me for Christmas a toy football game called New Footy, as it was then. It was little men that you kind of flicked around the ball, and goalkeepers on a little spiky thing that they could make the save. It was meant to be played by 2 people, but I didn't have a second person, so I played with my team this way.
Ambidextrous.
Yeah, the left-handed team didn't tend to win. But I would then start to commentate on these matches for myself. And so this was always kind of there. And then came the final year of my studies, and I was having to fill in application forms for jobs and such. And I thought, I was always interested in broadcasting. I'm intrigued by the whole thing, and I watching matches on TV and all that, and listening on the radio before TV. And when I'd been at Queen's, I'd been a DJ in the snack bar. They had what they called SUMS, Students' Union Music Society, and I was the 9 to 10 jock on that. I can't imagine how I ever got in there for 9 o'clock to do it, but I did. But you had a little cubby hole in the corner, and it only broadcast to the snack bar, and whoever was there. You just played music. But I did that. So I was thinking back and having done this, and maybe I should give it a go. So I sought an audition in the BBC, because at the time the only sporting outlet they had was a Saturday afternoon roundup show where people did like the match report I was talking about, and they were all part-time broadcasters. I mean, there were solicitors, there were school teachers, there were civil servants. They were a motley crew of guys older than me, but who had wanted to get involved. Maybe the odd former player among them as well, who was now in an adult life as opposed to a playing life. So I thought I could do that, and if I did that, I could see if I was any good at it. So I did the audition, I got the gig, and that's what I did in my final year on Saturday afternoons. I went to rugby matches and did reports. And when I was all over, and I now had a choice to make, because I had been offered a job in the civil service, what would I do? I thought, well, I'll put it on hold if I can. So they said, yeah, they'd put it on hold. And I thought I'd freelance for a year and see what happens.
See where it takes you.
See where it takes me. Before that year was up, I had a contract as a continuity announcer and newsreader.
Okay.
So the civil service got a thank you, but no thank you.
How did your parents feel about this one?
Funny, I was just going to tell you that my mother was apoplectic.
I imagine.
Apoplectic. You are taking such risks with your future.
This is a civil service. It's a job for life.
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely, and a pension and everything. And goodness knows you could end up at the top of the civil service and
work your way through the ranks.
Absolutely, and this will be wonderful. And you know, she was undoubtedly right. But by the same token, I don't think I would have quite enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed the journey I've been on through
all the years
of all the sporting events. So they weren't the best pleased.
No.
My father was more understanding, but he knew where this was coming from.
Right.
But she
did he say to you though? Right, you have your year after that now.
Well, he would be cautious enough, yeah. But he'd say, but I think once I got the contract,
he felt a bit more.
And then my mother would say. She forgot about the civil service because the BBC was like a second best civil service.
Okay.
She'd say, why did you get yourself a staff job? But I never did. But anyway, that's to say there's anything against that. But it was just the way it worked out for me. And another guy who started at the same time as me, Mike McKim is his name. he eventually got the staff job, but he is now retired.
Oh.
Yeah, so
longevity and stamina.
well, that part of it is also the fact that BBC kicks you out at 60.
Oh. Okay.
So, you know, if I'd gone down that road, you might be asking me to be here.
Yeah.
No interview, you're retired. When you were in BBC, did you have any growing pains starting out? Any
I think
difficulties?
I think I was lucky because I was I was at home. You know, I was in my hometown, home place. Knew what the score was, and I think the most important thing that they were concerned about at the time was how you spoke.
Oh.
You know, so in the board for the
how you enunciate your
job,
words,
yeah.
or
How do you pronounce? Said the head of programs, who was a man from the world of drama. How do you pronounce AMATEUR? And that was going to pass me or fail me. Amateur, not amateur.
Okay.
Amateur. So I saw where this was coming from, and I was able to give him the amateur.
what the answers you want.
Regardless of what I might have said
Okay.
in the pub, but I knew what he wanted.
Okay.
And
Did they ever try to neutralise your accent at all?
No, they didn't.
No.
No,
Okay,
they
that's
didn't. And I think I've been lucky on the accent front, because although I'm definably northern, because I've been away from there for so long, and part of that time was spent in England, but most of it was here. I haven't. It's kind of become my own.
Yeah. Distinct.
Yeah. So no, they never did. No, it was not. As long. I mean, you have to remember too that it was whatever the standards were at the time, and that's not to say that standards have slipped. It's just to say that standards are different. I mean, if you even think of the BBC, the London BBC, like Radio 4, where they now have regional accents reading the news, including a lady who went to the same school as me in Belfast, whose name escapes me at the moment, but she reads the news on Radio 4 in a Belfast accent,
Okay.
which would never have happened when I was starting. I think I could never have ended up as a newsreader on Radio 4 at that time, but she has done it. Clugston, that's her name.
Because
Yeah.
we asked Jared Canning the same, and he said no. I think he said he did a couple of lessons, just how to pronounce his words
yes.
a bit more, but like they never said in any way to conceal his accent or to.
No. I think there's a richness and diversity in all of the accents, and as a linguist, which is what I started out at, I mean, I'm always fascinated by, in particular, German. When I lived in Germany as part of my program. When I hear Germans speak, which I do a lot, because when we go on holiday to Spain or the Spanish islands, there are invariably loads of Germans around, and it's one of my little, lying up by the pool, hearing them talk, and not doing anything except soaking up the rays. I'm listening to them. I'm wondering where they're from, if I can place their accent.
Okay.
So I think there's a wonderful richness and diversity in accents.
Did you ever hear them talk about you at the poolside, and then did they think
No,
you could hear?
the funniest thing of that was from some years ago. I'd been at a concert in Croke Park which featured Billy Joel and Elton John.
Very good.
And I had a T-shirt which had been bought for me, which was the kind of all the tour dates on it.
Okay.
And we were on holiday in the Canaries, as it happened, not long after. And I don't know why these people did it, but I had been to the shops, and I was coming back with a bag of groceries to our apartment, and I passed this apartment with a garden, and in the garden were these people, and they saw the T-shirt, and they made a very disparaging remark in English about the T-shirt, obviously assuming that I wasn't English or didn't speak English, but that was no. I've never heard the Germans talk about me at the poolside. No.
So before we continue and talk about your broadcasting career, let's talk about your time spent in Queen's University.
Oh,
like
yes.
you said, you studied German and French.
Yes.
What was it that drew you to studying languages at university?
My only child had an older cousin who was also an only child, 6 years older than me, Stuart, and Stuart went through Queen's before me, doing French and Spanish, and I showed some kind of aptitude for languages through the early years of school, and so going on towards, in the system there, it was O levels and then A levels. I retained, we all had to do French to O level. I retained German to O level, did well in both French and German, and so they became 2 of my 4 A level subjects. And because there was a kind of family thing that this had led somewhere, Stuart, had a career as a school teacher. This had led somewhere. It made sense family wise, and I enjoyed it. So that's how I started doing that. First 3 subjects I did, you had to do 3 in your first year. So I did French, German and political science for 1 year, and then I majored on French and German. And actually in the degree that I did, it was a 10-part degree, and you could go 5 and 5 or 6 and 4.
Okay.
So I went 6 and 4 German, on the basis that I figured I was going to have to go away for a year. If I went to France, I'd always found French rather more straightforward because it constructs itself like English. I felt if I went to France, I'd come back speaking fluent French and never get my German back. But if I went to Germany, I'd come back speaking fluent German, but I would get my French back.
You'd still pick your French, yeah.
And that's in fact what has happened, because funnily enough, my daughter only in November married a guy from France.
Oh, great.
So half the wedding was...
I was gonna ask.
I take her work in the room that day.
I tell you, Father of the Bride's speech was pretty good. I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know the French word for son-in-law now, both.
Because I was actually going to ask, like, have you found that studying those 2 languages helped your professional career? Be it
Did you ever use it in a professional capacity? Did you ever commentate in?
No, but I've been
in press conferences. I'm sure that might be handy.
Well, yes, like before the first game in Euro '88. I was interviewed on German TV.
Oh.
We got an exclusive interview with the chief of police in Stuttgart because he wouldn't do it in English because he wasn't confident in English.
Oh, okay.
And I was able to do it in German. Yeah, very good.
I'm not going to go any further.
Oh, is this what we're doing now?
I've forgotten a lot of my German from secondary school.
But the other thing I was going to say to you was the language thing. At the Seoul Olympics, when Ben Johnson was done for drug use, and the press conference was held, it was in Seoul, and I was in the broadcast centre in Seoul, not at the press conference. The press conference was in French because that's the language of the Olympics, and I was letting it go. And Max Mulvihill, the producer in Dublin, said, "If you understand any of this, feel free to do it simultaneous, not a simultaneous translation, but say what they're talking about."
Yeah.
So I did, and he came back to me again and he said, that's great, just keep it going there. And so I did. And unbeknownst to me, the press conference, having made its statement that he'd been banned and stripped of his gold medal, BBC in London had gone back to studio in London to discuss this, but we were still showing the press conference. And on it went for a bit, until they asked for, and I was doing my thing, and then they asked for a question from the floor. And this is where I got really lucky, because the guy who stood up was German. So he asked the question in German. So I knew what that was, and they answered him in German. I knew what that was. And then back to French. And then when they'd had enough, they said, "Okay, you can finish up now." I think we got the gist of what that was about. Hand back to studio. So I did. And what happened there? Oh yeah, apparently the following day, the late lamented Irish press had it on the front page. BBC had nobody to deal with the press conference, and RTÉ was able to
pull out this big win.
Very good.
Yeah.
So it did come in handy. So
it did. Yeah.
And so let's talk about your broadcasting career. So you said that you started with BBC.
Yeah.
What are some of your fondest memories of your time with BBC?
Any teething problems early on?
Teething problems? You wouldn't expect me to tell you. No, honestly, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, I was riven with nerves for the first while, and I made a bit of a hames of one of my early reports delivered live, because the studio was, you kind of sat on chairs like this. Let's say the main production desk was up over there, and the guy sitting behind it was the presenter of the program. So we all sat along a wall and shimmied up seats until it was our turn.
Okay.
And then you're sitting in front of this guy and he introduces you, and I was just, I don't know, I got my breathing wrong, and I started to choke halfway through the thing, which is most embarrassing. But I got to the end of it, but I felt rotten. I mean, and now I know that if there is an issue, you deal with it. You don't dig a hole for yourself. It happens, and you get on with it. But I recall that. So that would count as my worst teething problem. But they were very good to.
It didn't put you off when you went
not at all.
back?
No. I went back, and they were very good to me. and they had it was almost an unofficial career path that they would work out for you, because this lady Joy Williams, she would be aware that there wouldn't be necessarily enough work in sport to sustain a freelance career, even for a young lad. So she would actively look at other areas in the organisation. Like they had a programme that they called Speaking Personally, which was a bit like, you'd be familiar maybe with the BBC's Desert Island Discs, where they'd invite in a personality who would talk for half an hour and pick favourite music. So she said, we'll get you a few Speaking Personally. So she did, and I did one with Willie John McBride, for instance.
Okay.
If it was a sporting context, she would put me forward to be the host that day, and so it worked. So they looked after me very well. But then the same could be said for RTÉ, because it's so I think it's in everybody's interest that everybody's on side, and that's what I've found all the way through. Yeah.
What prompted the switch?
Very simple. A letter from Fred Cogley. I was by now doing football as well as rugby for BBC Northern Ireland, and it was 1978, and RTÉ were about to do the World Cup in Argentina. That was their second World Cup. They'd done the one in West Germany in '74, and they had done that kind of based in Frankfurt, with travelling from Frankfurt to wherever, and some, I think, off tube commentary as well. But they were now more confident that they could handle the thing from Argentina. And the editor who would be in charge of the away team, Mike Horgan, had looked at it and said, we need 4 commentators for the World Cup. They had Jimmy McGee, they had Philip Green, radio commentator, they hired Billy George of the Cork Examiners, it was then, and they were stuck for a 4th. And Mike said, what about the fellow up in Belfast? I wonder would he be interested? So it was 1978, so it was a letter arrived.
Okay.
And it was from Fred Cogley, the head of sport in RTÉ. And he said that they were discussing servicing the World Cup, and he didn't want to, the phrase he used, which I'd never heard before, was raise a hair among colleagues in Dublin. Yeah. That perhaps they would think it odd that they'd ask somebody from outside. And so Fred said, I don't want to raise a hair, but we just wanted to send you out to see if you'd be at all interested in joining the RTÉ team for Argentina '78. Well, as you can imagine, I was straight out to the postbox to send him a letter back, and that's how it all began with RTÉ.
Very good.
Yeah.
So how was your first World Cup?
It was a dream.
Yeah.
It was a dream. I was in a place called Mendoza for 4 weeks.
Okay.
Nobody'd heard of Mendoza then. It's in the foothills of the Andes, but now everybody knows Argentine wine comes from there. But nobody knew then. So it was a flight to Buenos Aires and then another hour and a half to the Andes. And we did 6 games in the 4 weeks. And among the games we did were games involving Brazil and Holland, who went on to the final. And I also did the game, it's famous in World Cup lore, but it might be a bit, it is before your time obviously, but you'll find it in any history of the World Cup as one of the great games. Was not Argentina, Holland and Scotland, Archie Gemmill, or was it, they beat them 3-2, whoever it was anyway, Scotland. But that was just a wonderful experience, to be at a World Cup and be at a World Cup like that, where there was time to soak it up. I mean, now when we do World Cups, there's a game here and then you might have the next day off, you might not have the next day off, but there's a lot of travel involved, and you can almost feel it, a bit like Con Houlihan said about Italia '90, and somebody else, he said, what was it like being in Italy at the World Cup? Sorry, no, I've got it wrong. He said, what was it like being, what was Italia '90 like? He said, I don't know, I was there. And it does tend to be a bit like that. Because it wasn't a 32-team World Cup back then either, which made it a lot easier. And bear in mind, Euro '88 for Ireland, that was only an 8-team tournament.
Well, the next World Cup's going to be next year.
I'm not
64.
sure.
Yeah.
A lot.
48.
48.
Yeah. And
So George, you were in good company on your first World Cup panel, Mr. Jimmy McGee.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And Jimmy and I went on to become great friends, and we did a program called Know Your Sport for 11 years, which keeps popping up on like Twitter and YouTube from time to time. I don't know where people get the stuff. Obviously there are
digging through the archives.
A lot of attics with a lot of old VHS cassettes in it that people kind of recast and throw out there. I don't. They were great days. We had great fun. Jimmy was a great character as well as everything else. He had a fund of stories, and I remember one day there was a gig we were both involved in, a private cycle race at Michael Hearn Classic, the John Hearn Classic. John Hearn was an ironmonger in Clonmel, Carrick-on-Suir, and Sean Kelly, of course, came from down that way. And this was when Kelly and Roach were huge. So John Hearn, the late John Hearn's son Michael, decided to name a classic cycle race in his dad's honour. And it took place on a couple of occasions before it ever got onto TV.
Okay.
But they were ambitious, so they wanted it to be like it was on TV if it wasn't. And they had Jimmy and me down there because we were involved together on the Nissan Classic, which was on at the time. But I remember being in the hotel dining room for breakfast, and Jimmy was there, and in front of him was a plate of 4 sausages, and to the side the Irish Independent sports pages. And I said, "Is that the secret?" And he said, "Yeah."
And of course, at the time, you were a prominent commentator now for football and rugby.
Yeah.
And then eventually, you did have to make a
Yeah.
decision. What was that decision difficult, choosing one over the other?
No, because it was football I wanted to start doing, and football. I started doing rugby because there was no space in football, and it was the next best thing for me. I was very fortunate over all those years to get the chance to combine the two, and I got some great gigs out of it. I think the Irish World Cup against Australia in 1991, the Brian O'Driscoll hat-trick in Paris, first win since goodness knows when, you know, and he was only 21 at the time. So there were, it would have been hard to say, no, I don't want to do this anymore, but circumstances kind of conspired, and new people came along like Ryan.
Yeah, we were about to say your move to football kind of facilitated his push towards being the main commentator for rugby on RTÉ.
Well, but I'd have to say that it's important that I think, I mean, much in all as I enjoyed the opportunity of doing both, I think it's important that you have an identifiable voice with each.
A niche.
That it's not the same guy doing everything, which was the way it was done when there weren't enough people around. I think it's a sign of the I don't know, how would you put it, the strength of the coverage that you have your own specialists in the various fields. And I still have a wonderful combination of I nearly said duties, but they don't feel like duties. You know what I mean? Commitments, if you like. In that I do the football, but I also get to do athletics, track and field.
Yeah, I was going to say you've had the chance to commentate on a few different sports through the likes of the Olympics and stuff like that. So outside, let's say football and rugby, what are some of your favourite sports to watch and commentate on?
I love track athletics.
Yeah.
The drama in a race, be it a sprint, but I mean a 100-metre sprint is just incredible to think that, you know, it's almost as if you're running the race yourself, because there's no margin for error whatsoever. If you think that it's reckoned that you speak 3 words a second and 180 words a minute, and the race lasts, well, by the time the gun is gone till they're over the line, it could be less than 10 seconds. So that's only giving you, what, 30 words?
Yeah.
And you've got to
be selective about your 30 words.
And you're also faced with the process. You've got to decide who you're going to point up here, because you can't say
you don't have chances.
You know, you might be a little slower out of the blocks than Colin and Gavin.
Probably.
Gavin from Cavan might be an outsider. And suddenly I've decided that I'm going with Colin, but you have got a better start and you're up first. And then as I'm noticing that, and my 30 words are coming out, suddenly he's in lane 8 and I haven't been looking at him at all. And that tends not to happen in an Olympic or a World Championship final, but it could happen on the way there. And it's such a challenge. And you know, when there is a 100-metre final, the stadium is so silent, and it's just you're really in the moment. It's an amazing experience. And then you get something like Thomas Barr in Brazil with
Fred Watford, man.
Yes, exactly. But that you know, the thing I was so touched after that. Jerry Thornley, writing up a race, quoted my commentary in its entirety in the Irish Times, the 40 whatever seconds of it that it was, but which didn't come to much on the page, obviously. But when something like that happens, then you say, my goodness me, it must have got that right, and it's a great feeling. But again, you only get the chance for that to happen if you've got to the point that you can go without thinking too much about it. It has to become almost like the golfer's muscle memory. You can't be searching for stuff in your mind.
You don't have time to.
No, because it's all over so quickly that you really need to go. And I mean, I'm often asked, do you write stuff down, phrases and things to use? And I say no, I don't, because I prefer to let it come to me. But it will only come to you if you have soaked up all this stuff beforehand. Yeah. And then, in the way that if you're having a conversation with somebody, the conversation will flow naturally because you know what you're talking about. It's you're confident. You're confident, yeah. And it's I just find that that's the way to do it. There are those who would, you know, when I worked in London, for instance, and this wasn't comedy, this was scripting for Sports Report at 5 o'clock when I would present that program, and they would ask you to, on a Friday, to write 3 intros for every reporter. Okay. Win, lose, draw. Oh, so that they could tell the reporter what you were going to say before their report, so that they could structure the report. But then Manchester United get beaten 7-0 at home, or beat Arsenal 8-0 at home, and what you wrote the day before, it's going to go out the window because it's not going to be relevant. But Arsenal haven't won at Old Trafford since 1976 today. They were beaten 8-0. Yeah. You know, you want to give it a bit more than that. Yeah. So that was early enough in my career. Like the first 10 years of my career, I was doing this stuff, and of course that was the way they did it. So I wasn't going to tell them, hey, you don't do it like that. But it did strike me that this was not the way you should be doing it. Mm-hmm. And then we're back to the button, however, and the but, that, and the middle B being broadcasting. You know, you're telling the story, and you're not writing it down to be read, and you're engaging with your audience. And I think that's the great thing about radio, because I do lyric now, that you've effectively got an audience of one, and so you're communicating.
Yeah. We'd be remiss now, given that you've experienced so many historical sporting moments over the years, to ask what are some of your favourites that stand out in memory? Well,
funnily enough, that Ben Johnson Carl Lewis race, that 100 metres in Seoul in '88, because it was an amazing experience. Like the Eastern audience wouldn't be used to this as a sporting thing. They wouldn't be into athletics in the way that maybe we in the West would be. And so the majority in the stadium in Seoul were in awe of what was about to happen, and their silence before that race went off, and it happened at like lunchtime because of the time difference. It was just, you could have cut it with a knife. It was amazing, and that was my first Olympic 100-meter final into the bargain. So you can imagine what it felt like, and it was just such a dramatic race. Shame that it was tarnished in the way it was, but that was one. Now, what else? Obviously, Stuttgart '88 and that shootout in Genoa in 1990, and the Italian game in New Jersey in 1994, and the playoff in Iran, and Robbie Keane scoring the only goal against Germany before the World Cup final, the only goal in the World Cup before they conceded to Brazil in the final. You know, on and on and on, and some great, you know, like Champions League finals as well. That just
I was about to ask about actually, just, you know, of course there are the international moments, but what actual club football moments stand out?
Well, we went to the European Cup finals. It was in 1989, and on the way home stopped off in Liverpool to do Liverpool Arsenal in a match that would decide the league. Liverpool could afford to lose 1-0. They lost 2-0. Michael Thomas won the league for Arsenal. I got to do that match.
We joined,
and
yeah, my dad still kind of looks back on Michael Thomas with.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Yeah.
Arsenal, my team.
Liverpool are mine, if you can't guess.
Yeah. So I mean, everybody has to have a team, and that happened to be mine, and it was just, that was a wonderful moment. And I've had other great. I was with Arsenal in Copenhagen when they won the Cup Winners' Cup, was it that time? You know, so they're and big matches. Like I have a great draw for Germany still, because of having lived there, and I'm very fond of Munich as a city. That wasn't where I was in Germany. I was up in the Ruhr, so the team up there would have been Borussia Dortmund. But I just really enjoy going to see Bayern Munich play, and of course the way that the game has evolved now, they have become almost the pinnacle in Germany. Though
They're
not this year.
too well at the moment.
No, they're not. They're that change of coach hasn't really worked out the way they would have wanted it. Nico Kovac.
I'd say you enjoyed the 2006 World Cup tremendously.
Oh, I did. I mean, that was almost like revisiting my time in Germany, and of course Germany by now was united, which it wasn't when I was there. So I got to see places that I wouldn't otherwise have been, like Leipzig, and it was just fantastic. Leipzig is an amazing city. It's got a railway station that has the longest or widest, what would you call it, number of platforms, but it's huge station, and it's got a stadium that's dates from the old Soviet era time, which was 100,000 seater central stadium, but it's a listed building. So what they did for the World Cup, because they didn't need 100,000 stadium, they built a stadium inside the stadium. So the exterior is the old communist.
But it's actually just a stadium within a.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the stadium, the modern stadium where Red Bull play, is actually inside. It's amazing.
Were you one for memorabilia over the years?
Yes. Yeah.
What, anything stand out that you would have collected?
I have Pele's signature from a line, a queue for a check-in at Mendoza Airport. Yeah, I got his autograph. I've met many and interesting. My memorabilia, funny enough, oftentimes is in my head more than in, like I say collect programs. I don't really collect them. I get a program. I like to get a program, and I never get the chance to read it before the game often enough. But I like to have it and just look back on these things. But there's not. I mean,
even any of the press badges, anything like that.
Oh, I've loads of those.
Throw them in the box or anything.
I do have I mean, and the funny thing is, like a Champions League press pass doesn't actually say which match it is. It's got a code on it. I mean, I don't know how they came by the code, but like say something like CX2F on it. It's like a postal code.
Right.
So you never know. It's just the date would be the giveaway. So oftentimes I'll give them to like kids who might be interested in it. But it never says Manchester United against Paris
Whoever,
Saint-Germain.
yeah.
But the ones to really keep are like the World Cups or the Olympics or the major championships, which have your photograph on it and your name. It says what it was.
Yeah, the lanyard.
Yeah, and I would normally keep the like you need a ticket, a SAD, an SAD, secondary accreditation device. So you need one of those to get in to any specific match when you've got a World Cup accreditation, and then if you're going to do a stand up before the game, you need another ticket for that. So I would have a couple of those as well as the actual ID.
Did you ever pick up any jerseys off a player or anything like that?
No, but there was a time when I worked for UEFA when RTÉ lost the rights to the Champions League TV3 at the start of this century for 3 years. Through the good offices of Des Casey of Dundalk, who was then a vice president of UEFA and is a lifetime vice president now. Des got me a gig as a media officer, which RTÉ were quite happy about because it was going to get me on the inside and maybe increase my contacts. Anyway, a media officer for UEFA is basically there to manage the press box of more the broadcasting facilities, the press box, because the money's in the broadcasting.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's assigned the media officer to a team and stays with them until they're knocked out.
Okay.
But only during their home matches.
Okay.
I should have said maybe it's assigned to a stadium. So the first one I did was Porto. I have a Porto shirt.
Very good.
Along the way, I did Monaco.
Oh, nice.
And I have a Monaco shirt with my name and the number 10 on it.
Did you pick the number?
No, they did.
Oh, okay.
They did.
They must have held you in high regard.
The front man.
Yeah. So I have those hang at home in the wardrobe. Much to my wife's, I won't say annoyance, but she just wonders why I have them.
Over your career, George, who is the best player you've had the joy to watch?
Well, coming from the same town and having been christened in the same church, George Best.
Of course.
I had the good fortune of seeing him in his pomp in the 60s when I was a spectator. and then I had the opportunity to not only commentate on him, but to actually kind of get to know him. And ultimately I was involved in a couple of TV shows, tribute shows to him, when they had me along in the audience, and I kind of got to meet him socially as well. And he was the loveliest guy. He was just had this unfortunate tendency to not be able to stay out of mischief, and it's sad, very sad that his career on the pitch didn't last as long as it might have, and that it ended the way it did. But he and Pele I didn't see play because in the flesh. He was working for TV when I met him. But having seen some wonderful players, even today, start today with Messi and Ronaldo and start coming back. I think what Ronaldo has done, how he has managed his playing career, is absolutely phenomenal.
He's 24 this week, I think. This week.
The specimen he's turned himself into, and the difference he made when he went to Juventus to them in Europe. Yeah. And there's so many of them. Look at all the leagues now. There's some wonderful, fabulous players, and I just think that in many ways the money coming into the game, the big money, has turned it into something very different from our perspective. There's no access to the players the way there was. It's all by appointment only, and you can never get to know them, and you'll never.
And even still, even when you do probably get to meet them, there's a certain degree of media training involved.
Oh, absolutely.
On their behalf,
But I would have had, for argument's sake, Glenn Hoddle's phone number.
Mm-hmm.
That never happened before.
Yeah.
Never happened again. But what the money has done is it has raised the standard to such an extent, because obviously the money is a driver for the clubs, and they want to achieve and they want the best, and the facilities have to be the best, and so it goes on and on. So the debate at the moment about do you do away with the away goal rule in Europe, because why was it brought in? Because things were difficult when you went away back then. You might draw a team from behind the Iron Curtain. You would know none of the players. You had no way of knowing who the players were, and the pitch, you had no idea what the pitch was going to be like. So it was, going to be very, very difficult to go away. Now it's not so difficult to go away, because if you play in the Juventus Stadium, or you play in the Bernabeu, or you play in Wembley, or you play in St James's Park in Newcastle, the pitch is always going to be the same and immaculate. You consider, I'm sure they're all like this, but Arsenal's training ground is the one that I actually saw in action. The pitches are the same dimensions, the same grass type, the same everything as the Emirates, so that they're playing. Yeah, and I think that really that's been a great thing about it, and it's made it into the entertainment that it can be. But sadly, it's marginalised it for those who like to get up close and smell the imbrication.
I'm going to bring it back slightly, back to Jimmy McGee. So last night, I went home. I live in Diggs here in Dublin with a 90-year-old man.
All right.
Just myself and himself in a house in Marino. But Tom actually used to work with Jimmy McGee.
Oh, really?
For a long time, and he was actually a neighbour of his.
Okay.
They would have went to school together.
Did he work the railway with him?
Yeah, he did, and they talked about it.
Yeah.
Thomas told me the stories hundreds of times.
Yeah.
But I told him that I was interviewing you today.
Yeah.
And he said, "Ask for Jimmy. So no, I just said I'd tell you about that. And
yes, absolutely.
Glad that you knew about his time on the railway. Did he speak with fondly?
He did. We had great times because we were away a lot together. There's another story he tells about. He used to tell about himself. When he was growing up on the Cooley Peninsula, and there had been a lot of GAA around, and Jimmy was always into association football, and he told this story about waiting for the bus one day, and he had his boots in a paper bag. He tried to look inconspicuous because he knew that the one where he was going wouldn't have necessarily gone down that well in the local area. And an old neighbour woman came out to the gate and saw him waiting at the bus stop and said, there you go now, McGee. Look at you there with your boots in the bag off to play the soccer. But Jimmy would tell that story again, so you can tell Tom.
I will. I'll play it for him now.
So we'll step away from the sporting aspect of your career and step into the musical aspect of your career. So your work with Lyric FM, when did that start? When we were approached, or did you suggest it?
Well, Lyric is 20 years old this year. I never quite get, was it 98 or 99? What happened was, I started in radio, and I found radio, as I've said, a very intimate medium, and I really enjoy working in radio. I enjoy working in television, but television is a team game, very much a team game, whereas in radio, like, you are on your own.
Which do you prefer, actually, TV or radio?
Ooh, well.
If you had to pick now, I know you're quite first.
If I had to pick, gosh, that's a hard one. I suppose ultimately I'd be saying radio, because television has changed so much, and the end of television that I'm in is so rights dependent, and you know, it could be we won't have the opportunity to show the stuff anymore. You know, when I started off, public broadcasters like RTÉ and BBC showed the Ireland matches because they were there. There was no that's why they were shown. The national broadcaster did that. But now, you don't know. Maybe not. It takes governments to say this is a listed event and we have to show it on free-to-air television. But that needn't necessarily be the national broadcaster. That could be a commercial operation. So I can see the way the wind is blowing. But that would sound that it was a selfish decision on my part, that I say I want to do radio. No, I do. I've always enjoyed it. I find it a very, very intimate medium. I listen a lot to radio. I listen to radio in the car as opposed to playing music. I could tell you on my way here, my radio listening included RTÉ Radio 1, News Talk, Lyric, Classic FM, and you'll laugh at this one, but Westdeutsche Rundfunk. On the app through the car, the Bluetooth.
Very good.
Yeah. So I had them all at once. But when I get fed up with one of them, I just
pop over to the
other one. Yeah. And I had set up the German station on the phone so that if I got fed up with what, I could go there. Because I do like to. It's another way of keeping the German going. So radio, yes. And how did I get in? I had seen or observed, better put, in RTÉ that the odd guy would get a gig filling in for, say, Joe Duffy on Live Line when he was on his holidays. And I thought this might be a way to get back into radio, because I wasn't doing any radio. And this would have been the 90s. And I met various people and nothing came of it. And then Lyric started up. So the first head of Lyric was a man from Belfast called Seamus Crimmins, whom I kind of knew. So I rang him up on spec and said, asked him to meet me. And he was very nice, and he said, yes, why don't we have afternoon tea in the Shelburne Hotel? We're back to the
Shelburne.
And anyway, went along, and I said, look, I'd really like to do a bit of radio, but I appreciate I can't offer myself to you on a regular basis. He's going to run a station with regular strands every day and weekends. I can't really offer myself on any kind of regular basis, but I would like if you had an opportunity to have a go as a music presenter. And he said, fine, that's great, fine, I'm happy to try that. So he did. He tried really hard. He tried all sorts of things, but it never quite worked out. And then he gave me a show on Christmas Day 2002. Now I wasn't in on Christmas Day.
Okay,
but he found me a slot, and I did it like a football commentator's Christmas show, just as a one-off. On Christmas afternoon, and that was fine. And then he left and went to the Arts Council, and I thought, shit, you know,
that's the end of the year now.
I was actually getting somewhere, and now this is gone. So nothing ventured, nothing gained. A bit like how I started in Belfast, except it worked there, but now my sponsor has left Lyric. So back into throwing myself with renewed vigour into my sporting career. I found myself in Moscow commentating on Russia versus Switzerland because it had some relevance to Brian Kerr's Ireland. And in those days, mobile phones were less sophisticated than they are now, and they would interfere with the broadcast signal. So you had to turn off your phone if you were anywhere near a microphone. So I turned it off, and this match was in the the Lokomotiv Stadium in a far-flung suburb of Moscow. We came out of the match and got a taxi, and we're driving through the dark streets because the streetlights in Moscow then weren't great. And a strange foreign city, Russian writing and all this. I turn on my phone, I'm feeling like a spy when the phone beeps, it's got a message. I call up the message and this voice says, hello, my name is Aidan O'Doul, I'm the new head of Lyric. I wonder would you mind giving me a call? So obviously Seamus had left a file, and my name was on it. And Adon gave me a show on a Saturday morning from 11 to half 12. And his brief was, I'll give you 90 minutes like a football match, and I just want you to play what you like and talk about where you've been.
Okay.
And that's where it started. And then it expanded to become like a football match with extra time, which was 2 hours. And then it became 3 hours, and now it's 3 hours and 2 days. So, yeah, Saturdays and Sundays, 10 until 1. Give it a go, it's great stuff.
It's a long game, yeah.
It's a long game, yeah.
And you have an affinity for classical music?
I do, yeah. I was taught piano as a kid. That developed into cello, which I played in the school.
Oh, you were the chief cellist.
Yeah. I gave that up after I left school. I mean, it was a question at the time. Like, I wanted to play sport. There just wasn't the time to do everything.
Could you still pick it up, maybe?
Yeah, but not to any kind of standard. But I can play the piano.
Okay.
Yeah, still do. My wife Linda gave me a baby grand a couple of Christmases ago.
Lovely.
Yeah, for Christmas. So we have that as a proud piece of furniture in the house, and I play that.
I'm actually in grade 2 piano.
Good man.
Yeah, I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Wow, great to
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. My parents would be very proud of Mary and
Yeah.
Tony, yeah.
Yeah, I can play
all
that.
that money went well.
I can play that on tin whistle.
Oh, okay.
We could end
We should
this.
collaborate somehow.
Oh, yeah.
Do you play it?
I play guitar and I sing.
Can you play Mary Had a Little Lamb?
Well, we could
It's
end this with a song.
Oh, we do have a piano out there in the
The
gym
newest,
centre.
hottest boy band on the
So who am I, Louis Walsh?
Now you're the front man. You're who's it? What's your name? Shane Foylan from Westlife. Yeah, we're just a supporting cast. Guys, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think we'll go to the slightly light-hearted side of it. So George, outside of sport and your musical interests, what else? What do you do to relax?
Well, before first thing I did this morning was take our two Jack Russells for a lengthy walk. Their names are Brenda and Eddie. The reason for that.
Are they married?
They're not married.
Oh,
They just live
They
together.
sound like a married couple a bit.
Well, they act like a married couple. She gives him hell.
So just like a normal marriage.
Girls, don't be taking this as offensive. They were in the kennel recently because we took a week away, and when I came back, the kennel lady said to me, "She gives him an awful time."
It's obvious, so.
Yeah. Anyway, they're called Brenda and Eddie because you might be familiar with a song by Billy Joel called "Scenes from an Italian Restaurant," and in the middle section, that's the one that begins "Bottle of red, bottle of white, all about your appetite." But the middle section goes Brenda and Eddie with the popular steadies and the king and the queen of the prom, riding around, soft top down and the radio on. And so it goes.
So there, yeah.
But
Did you buy the two of them at the same time?
No, there's a good story about that as well. But just about the Brenda and Eddie in the song, they broke up at the end. We had Eddie, who was a present from our son, who's a vet.
Okay.
And he got us the dog. My wife's family always had Jack Russells, and we were going to give him an odd name like Killigan or something. But the kids decided he had to be Eddie because of is it Frazier had a dog called Jack Russell called Eddie. So Eddie was Eddie. Anyway, because we had Eddie, there was an Eddie in my life. I would occasionally be singing this song, Brenda and Eddie with the popular steadies. So the lady who the trainee doctor then turned up at the door one day with this little girl pup and said, meet Brenda. That was how that happened.
You took Brenda and Eddie for a walk this morning?
Yeah, I took Brenda and Eddie for a walk this morning, and then I had a cup of coffee and then I came here. But this is how I relax. We did. Linda and I, we would often go for quite lengthy walks. She's very much into making sure I'm fit, and she's fit because she's in the medical game herself. She's a radiographer. But yeah, we do that. We go and we would go to concerts, classical concerts, both here and in Belfast. And if we're in Belfast, we'd go and watch Ulster play rugby.
Very good.
Just to keep the flag flying, so to speak. So yeah, that would be how we would tend to relax. I don't have any. I play the piano from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, we would just go places and and enjoy the open air.
Very
I
good.
think you asked one of our main questions that we usually do ask there as well. Tea or coffee? Would you be
I'd be more coffee, yeah.
more coffee?
I
Yeah.
do like tea from time to time, but I'm
Mm.
definitely coffee. I'm hooked on espresso ristretto.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have you got a wee machine at home?
We do, yeah. That was something we got a present of that. I would never have thought of it. I thought this is a gimmick, you know, because I was very much. I'm not I'm not a kind of cafe latte guy and any of that. I would be into the more coffee than the milky drink, and I was always making filter coffee, which I would drink black. You know, grind it, put it in the little cone, filter it, and drink it.
How do you find the coffee in RTÉ actually?
Better than it was.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
the
up
Americano.
to 10.
The Americano the last Americano I had in RTE was very, very good.
Okay.
Very good.
Was that from the canteen then?
No, it was from the Oasis, which is just an area, little snack bar below our office
Very good.
in the new building near Nutley Lane. The coffee in the canteen is very good too.
Yeah, it is.
If I'm doing the show in Dublin and I haven't had breakfast, I would very often have a Danish that I shouldn't be having, and a coffee to get me going, because I need the caffeine shot. But yeah, I tend to drink the coffee as an Americano with hot water in it. But it's I just thought those things were a gimmick, but now I'm a great fan.
A few guests have told us now that this is a hard question to think of off the cuff, but 3 guests, living or dead, that you would have over for a dinner party.
Oh my goodness!
So
That is
generally, I think we need to actually start
In
including
advance,
this.
To have a bit of a chance of thinking about it. Well,
Yeah.
there would be a sports person for sure, and there would be a musician for sure. And I think the musician I would have would be Barry Douglas, who's a concert pianist from Belfast, who played the concert hall only recently, internationally acclaimed, won the Tchaikovsky Prize in 1986 or 7 in Moscow. Went to the same school as me, some years behind me. So to have him there, and I have interviewed him, but in the past for the radio, but to have him there would be to kind of plot his course through the international dimension of what he's done.
Okay.
To compare to what I've had the opportunity of doing as only an onlooker.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would have a player.
Okay.
I'm not sure who, and I'm some frantically
Okay,
thinking
it's
who best that I would like to have there. I've mentioned George Best, but I don't think I'd prefer somebody I knew less about.
Okay, so
To
you get
you want to find out more
yeah.
That I'd be able to find out more about. And you know, I actually think, and this is going to be a funny one, it would be Jupp Heynckes,
The former
Bayern Munich manager.
Yeah.
I shall tell you why, because I found his career path fascinating. He was the centre forward for Borussia Mönchengladbach when I was living in Germany.
Okay.
And where I lived in Germany, in the Ruhr, I was able to go to a match every Saturday because there were 8 or 9 teams in the immediate vicinity. And Mönchengladbach were not long out of being, you know, top European,
Giants.
or about to become top European. Sorry, the wrong end. So the 70s, they were about to become a top European team, and Heynckes was their centre forward. Heynckes went to Real Madrid and got fired for winning the Champions League. He went to Bayern Munich and they let him go, which they shouldn't have done. And then when they got into bother with after Guardiola, they got him back, and he did it again. And then he said, "I've had enough." Now, what fascinates me about him is he's now in his 70s. He comes from the area near Mönchengladbach, which is the Lower Rhine, and he still lives there in a farmhouse with his wife and whatever animals he has, and he's a grown-up daughter. But when he was managing Bayern, he lived in a hotel in Bayern, and he just watched football on TV, and then he would go home when he could. But I just think to have gone through life and done all that and been the success that he was, but to be able to maintain, well, he's obviously got a solid marriage, to be able to maintain all that while living the life that he did, and to have had that success as both a player and then as a manager, I think that he would be a fascinating person to have at a dinner table, and he would, because he's the age he is now, would have so much to say. Yeah. And then I don't know, the third person would have to be a woman.
Okay.
Because I couldn't imagine having that kind of conversation. Of course you can have a lads' night out, but I would want this to be
A little more civilized.
a little more, and to have another dimension to it. And I'm desperately thinking who I would like to have there as as the kind of the balancing act. And I think it would have to be somebody from the world of politics.
Okay.
And then again, I'm back in Germany
Okay.
for Angela Merkel,
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
who was the daughter of a clergyman from West Germany,
Mm-hmm.
who was moved to East Germany. So she grew up in East Germany and has now been the most prominent politician of the United Germany era.
Mm-hmm.
So in the hope that that isn't too Teutophonic,
Okay.
that would be my three: Barry Douglas, Jupp Heynckes and Angela Merkel.
That's a very good answer. Yeah.
And it gives you the opportunity to cross dialects like you like to do
Yeah.
as well.
This is
Yeah.
some good music.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what-
I think I need to up my game.
So we'll finish then with our traditional last question.
Yeah, we usually ask our guests about is it the best piece of advice that's been imparted onto them or that you could impart onto someone else.
Best piece of advice: work hard. Keep your concentration. Always have your aim in view, and don't try to get to the summit in one leap.
You have to plod your steps.
Yeah, apply yourself, and plot your steps.
Very good.
And it applies everything that I've had any experience of doing, be it my working life, be it my personal life, be it in terms of learning to play a musical instrument, be it in terms of learning a language, being in terms of doing the job that I do. Don't be discouraged by setbacks either, because nothing ever runs the way you think it will. And take your opportunities when they present themselves, and don't turn away. I think that's the kernel of it, is to be prepared to take the opportunity that presents itself, because you never know when or what that opportunity is going to be.
As we say, get our foot in the door.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
And don't let it out.
Don't let it out. Yeah. And that's very true. The hardest thing of all is getting in that door. But I think if you want to distill what I said, like I can't say I've never been asked that question before, but I wasn't quite prepared to answer it specifically in one, two, three words. But I think the kernel of it is to be prepared so that you are available to take the opportunity that presents itself.
And take your knocks as they come as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. George, thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you. Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
This has been In Conversation with George Hamilton. Thank you for listening.